This crumbling fortress, perched on a cliff 2,500 feet above a river valley, is where Dracula actually lived. So why do a million tourists every year visit this one instead? I'm in Transylvania to investigate the biggest deception in travel, and the real place isn't easy to reach. But what I found will completely change how you see one of history's most infamous figures. Millions of people visit this castle every year. It looks medieval, it sits on a cliff, and the story feels like it belongs here. But the truth is, Dracula, or Vlad Childhood, doesn't really belong to this place. Let's get something straight. There are two Draculas. There's the vampire from books and movies, created by Irish author Bram Stoker. And then there's the real man who inspired him, Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, but history remembers him by another name, Vlad the Impaler. Over the next 3 days, I'm visiting 3 of the places connected to the real Dracula. First, the castle that everyone thinks is his, then the medieval town where he was born, and finally the fortress where he actually ruled. This is Bran Castle, and it's often called Draculas Castle. And for most tourists, this is the place. The souvenirs, the stories, everything points here. But the truth is complicated. Historically speaking, Vlad Childhood didn't live here. There's no solid evidence that this was his home. At most, he may have passed through the area or been briefly imprisoned. The castle is built on top of this cliff, and everything from here is going to be hidden passageways and narrow staircases. The staircases are so narrow that only one person can pass at a time. In medieval times, this was defensive, much harder to attack. Today, it just means a lot of waiting behind slow-moving tour groups. Inside, the rooms are filled with medieval furniture and artifacts. But here's the thing, most of this has nothing to do with Vlad the Impaler. Bran Castle was owned by Queen Marie of Romania in the 1920s and 30s. A lot of what you see here, the furnishings, the personal items, the artwork, that's from her era, not from the 1400s when Vlad was alive. The castle does have some displays trying to connect to Vlad, like torture devices and weapons from his time. Okay, people can be quite creative when it comes to torture. But as Draculas Castle, it's marketing, very successful marketing that brings in thousands of tourists every year. But since I'm here in Bran, there's something else worth seeing that shows you a bit more about this region. Just down the road from the castle, there's an open-air village museum. And this is what actual Transylvanian villages looked like. Not Gothic vampire castles, just simple mountain farmhouses where real people lived. So here's the irony. Tourists come to Bran for a vampire myth in a castle Dracula never lived in, and they walk right past this museum that shows actual Transylvanian history. So now that you know the truth, the question becomes, where did Vlad the Impaler actually come from? Well, to answer that, I need to go back to the beginning, to a medieval town 2 hours from here, where in 1431 a boy named Vlad was born into a world of violence and betrayal. A boy who would grow up to become one of history's most brutal rulers. This is Sighișoara, one of the best preserved medieval towns in Europe. And in this house, Vlad Dracula was born. But this wasn't a peaceful childhood. Vlad grew up in a world of constant betrayal. His father was assassinated by rival nobles, and his older brother was tortured and buried alive. And when Vlad was just 11 years old, he was sent as a hostage to the Ottoman Empire. Imagine being a child, watching your family being destroyed by politics and violence, spending your teenage years in a foreign empire. This is where Vlad's worldview was formed, not in a castle, but here in these medieval streets. Watching power destroy everyone who wasn't ruthless enough. And there's one place where you can see exactly what that lesson turned him into. It's a 2-hour drive through the mountains, and it's not easy to reach. This is Buar Citadel, the fortress where Vlad the Impaler ruled, where the boy from Sighișoara became the monster of legend. To reach it, you have to climb over 1,000 steps. There's no cable car, no shortcut, and this is how Vlad wanted it, unreachable. He built this fortress using prisoners. He worked them until their clothes literally fell off their bodies. And when it was finally finished, he had a stronghold no enemy could siege. There's a legend about a golden cup Vlad placed at a public fountain. Anyone could use it, but no one dared steal it. For years it sat there, untouched. Because this is where Vlad the Impaler earned his name. They say the forests around are filled with impaled bodies, thousands of them. His own people, enemy soldiers, anyone who dared to question him. The boy from Sighișoara who watched his family destroyed, he made sure no one would ever destroy him. He ruled through a fear so absolute that even 600 years later we still tell stories about it. Bram Stoker took this history, the isolated castle, the bloodshed, the terror, and made it supernatural, turned the Impaler into a vampire. But standing here in the actual place where it happened, the real story is somehow darker than the fiction. Bran Castle gets 1 million tourists because it's beautiful and accessible, but this place, this is where history actually happened, where a traumatized child from a medieval town became one of history's most brutal rulers. Most people want the myth, but if you want the truth, well, you have to climb for it. So here's what I learned about Dracula. Bran Castle will sell you a vampire fantasy. And don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, worth visiting, but it's not real. Sighișoara will show you where he began, the medieval world that shaped him, and the violence that made him. And Poenari shows you what he became. The fortress is now in ruins, but the history is still there. Well, if you're willing to climb for it. But at least now I know the real story. And honestly, I think it's so much more interesting than the legend.